I'm stupid. Oh, it's great.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting for us. Welcome to the Adaptive Podcast. Today, we join you for episode 27.
27, huh?
27. And of course, today we are doing the second interview with Radji. For those of you who missed the first part of the interview, it is on episode 18. So you guys can go back and listen to that if you want to hear the full story. And we're going to continue from where we left off there.
Do it.
Before we get started, we'll do some call outs. Make sure you guys check our stuff out at Adaptive Jiu Jitsu on Instagram. We are also at our website is at adaptivejujitsu.com. We got a lot of great gear there for you guys and girls, for everybody. And make sure you check out Radji's Instagram, which is at Radji Barrett Jiu Jitsu. You guys can see it on the screen there. And his website, RadjiBarrettJujitsu.com, where you can learn more about the academy, where all of us train under Radji's
Tutelage.
Wow, that was awesome.
That is correct.
That is correct. So again, thanks for joining us. And without further ado, let's get started. I'm here, of course, with Radji.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
And Eli and Ed.
What up? What up?
And I'm Len. And together we are Adaptive Jiu Jitsu. So yeah, let's get it started. I think where we left off in episode 18, in the first part of your interview, we pretty much went through what got you to jiu-jitsu. We went through your swimming career. You did karate, and all that stuff leading up to that. And we think we ended right when you started training.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yes.
I think so. I know we started to talk a little bit about your beginning, but I think just for this episode, why don't we start there? Why don't we start like white belt, first day, Radji Barrett?
Sure.
Radji, can you tilt the mic up to your mouth a little bit?
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah, you should be able to
Perfect.
hear yourself
Good.
well in the headphones.
Much
right?
better.
I know that like
Thank
for
you.
me, I'm the youngest here of your tutelage. And it was one of the things, I had known you before doing jiu-jitsu. I had the pleasure of knowing you before. So coming in and seeing you in your element and seeing, being in the presence of a black belt is something that people don't understand until they actually start doing whatever that sport is.
Sure.
And when I started to be able to see what, you in your element, I was just amazed. Like I was totally like, holy shit. And for every white belt, when they're going through entering the sport for the first time, there's a lot that's happening. You have so many questions going on. We've talked about it several times on the show, but I think what's even more fascinating is looking at a black belt and wondering what was it like for him when he first walked in.
Sure.
Now that he's, where he's at.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I started my first kind of introduction to jiu-jitsu was with a Brazilian guy, Fernando, he had come to our fight team. He wanted to learn stand-up, and he kind of taught grappling a little bit. So he was my first introduction to real jiu-jitsu. I was getting triangled, armbarred, swept, getting my back taken, all of it. Immediately I sort of was fascinated by it. I don't know if I mentioned on the last podcast, but my original sort of feeling of grappling was I hated it because I wasn't good at it. Stand-up was my forte. I felt like I, always wanted to create distance. I'm like, why would you want to be on the ground? You can knock somebody out. So I didn't really understand, the art of it, and Fernando was sort of the first real like introduction and eye opener to what jiu-jitsu really was. I think at the time too, he was like maybe a second or third degree black belt. And this was, 2003, 2002, maybe at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty early.
Was this New York or in Princeton?
No. This was, he was from South, I think he lived in South Jersey somewhere. He had like a small academy out of like a Taekwondo school or something, but he would travel up to our fighting headquarters up in Elmwood Park, like twice a week. So that's where I met him. After I sort of took a little hiatus from the team, I was working at a physical therapy place in Brooklyn, and that was my real first start in jiu-jitsu, and that was probably 2000, the end of 2004, 2005. there was a patient in the therapy place. His old what was it? His younger brother, or older brother? I can't remember. Anyway, he owned a Taekwondo school in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, and this guy Davidis Torsavicius was teaching jiu-jitsu there a few days a week. Davidis was a pro MMA fighter. He was a black belt under Alex Soka in Long Island. Soka, I think, is like a 5-stripe black belt now. One of the highest ranking,
Nice.
black belts on the East Coast.
Mhm.
Really well known, like old school Gracie Baja black belt. Actually, I think my instructor, when he got his black belt, Soka got his brown belt, I think that same day.
Oh wow,
It was like an old picture.
Wow.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Davidis was like my first introduction. That arm drag, close guard sweep, flower sweep was the first sweep I learned that he taught. Taught like a inside single leg. Really good fighter. He fought man, the names are escaping me. LC Davis was one of the well-known guys that he fought in WEC. He fought Demetrius Johnson too, lost a decision.
Wow.
But he fought some really like high-level guys, at the time. Was a big name on the East Coast, like MMA scene at the time, but good jiu-jitsu, tough guy, Lithuanian guy, just tough.
Smaller.
Yeah, he fought. Davidis fought, I think, featherweight 145.
Yeah.
So he was short and stocky and strong, like super powerful.
Like Volkanovski.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar frame to that. Exactly.
Shout out to Lithuanians.
Shout out to
this guy.
Dude, his name is
I always
crazy.
forget about that.
Davidis. What was
Yeah.
it? Was
Davidis Torsavicius.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He sounds like if you meet him, he has to tear something on
Yeah.
you. Like he's gonna rip your arm off. You
Just
meet
did
him
the
in the
Keanu
ring.
Reeves.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Whoa.
So what was your like
So
what
I
were your
trained with him
thoughts?
for a little while. He ended up promoting me to blue belt.
mm,
I had taken a little break from jiu-jitsu, just life, got in the way. And I didn't really start until I moved back to Jersey in 2009.
Okay.
And that's when I started at Brunswick Jiu-Jitsu. So there was a few year gap where I was kind of like in between places. I was still living in Brooklyn, but not really training. Didn't really have like a home.
so you weren't really like sparked when you were in the city doing it?
I was, but there was just the opportunities to train just kind of dwindled, and just I just couldn't really invest the time,
Were you training in
outside
anything
of
else?
Oh no! I was just teaching full time. I was just teaching karate full time. So
Okay.
I was like doing this on my off hour. So
Right.
it was just my time just got more demanding, and it wasn't until I actually left, that I was able to do it.
So while you were with the Tiger Showman's team, this was kind of like your hobby on the side.
It was, yeah. I started grappling to help my overall, just fighting ability.
Right.
I'd done amateur and pro boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai rules, various rule sets like that. But I was always like very self-defense minded. So, as much as I didn't like grappling, I knew, in the bottom of my heart, like I would eventually have to learn it. You have to do it. And we would even do close range defense moves like wrist grabs, 2-hand choke from the front, arm choke from the back. Somebody goes to grab your shirt, so I was used to doing close range, defense, and even some takedowns and some joint manipulation. But once I went down to the ground, it was, not like really the most pleasant place to be for me.
What moment in time were you like, yo, this is it. This is what I want to do. Like, I love
Like
jiu-jitsu.
the bug.
Where you're like, not only just the bug, but you're like, I don't even care about.
As soon
the
as I
other
started
martial
training
arts
with
anything.
Davidis, I knew right away. He was awesome. He was a great instructor.
So
I fell in love with it
2005.
right away. Yeah.
Oh, so you.
So you
That's a long
knew
time.
it was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
that it was like life just brought you through that hiatus of not being able to train hard until you got to Princeton BJJ.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. There was powers that be, told me that I couldn't like train, somewhere else while I was teaching in a school. It was a very old school mentality. Like you only had to train in one place, you're getting everything you need. And, I always felt like something was a part of my training was lacking. And the funny thing is when I started training jiu-jitsu with Davidis and I would go back to the fight team and train, I was mostly known as the striker. Everyone wanted to spar with me. They wanted to work with me because, I was good, but I also had control. I'm not going to blast somebody by accident or, do anything like that. Of course things happen.
Yeah.
But I would always minimize, mistakes like that. And I just, I forgot what I was going to say.
I think training like that anyway makes you sharper because
it
it
absolutely
forces
does.
you to be in full control the whole time.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I train with some killers, and training lightly, but in a good way was minimize damage and minimize injuries for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too, because we talked about this a little bit in the first interview on how the knowledge hadn't opened up yet to the world. Technology was probably a big part of it, but fighters were very, pigeonholed into what they had been studying.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
if they were like a shoe fighter or like a wrestler or boxer, karate, taekwondo, whatever it was, they were excellent at that, but they had very limited skills in other areas.
That's completely different than fighters now. They're all learning everything together. I don't know. I guess we could debate. That's a whole other conversation aside from my own personal history of what's better, to specialize in one and then start to learn other things, or just learn everything together. There's benefits of both. To have it is
or master of one.
It's true. We watch MMA, and there's a lot of like grappling positions where guys could finish submissions, but it's like, well, they're not a specialist in doing that. They're a specialist like right up until that point, and then it's like their knowledge is gone at that.
Yeah, because somebody can learn really good jiu-jitsu defense, like to nullify it if you didn't really truly master it. In like MMA scenario, what I mean? Yeah. Because we see that all the time when we watch fights.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like
freak out. Like, it's funny because I never knew that, and now that like I can see the different paths that you can take at little things like grabbing the wrist or whatever it may be. And now I'm watching it in my head. I'm freaking out. I'm like, but it's right there. Why wouldn't you just do it? Like,
when you're watching, you mean?
Yeah, when I'm watching MMA. I also think that, like,
it's also different when you're getting punched in the face.
Oh, absolutely.
Certain things.
Everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson. Everybody. It's nuts to me because as you were saying it, like I would love to see people who are just specialized, and I know we talk more about the Olympics, which I have a question later on about that, but
sure.
When you do get to watch, like judo, for example, you're watching judo at the highest level, and the ippon is like, that's the point that you get when you travel over the person, right? When you
I think that's when their shoulders hit or something,
when they get pinned, and I think you have to actually travel over the top of the other player.
Oh, I don't know that.
I think it's just you throwing them on the ground.
Yeah,
whatever way it is, whether even if it's like you both fell because a guy tried throwing you.
A lot of times they end up going over their partner to avoid injury. They're just kind of like, that's why the forward rolls and backward rolls. It was funny, when Gary, my buddy Gary St. Ledger, came to do a seminar, he explained that, in judo, that's why the forward and backward rolls are important, because then you do, a hard throw.
Right.
If you stop yourself, you might hurt yourself. So just to continue the momentum and roll through with them, avoids like you getting
You're
hurt
controlling
too.
all the inertia by doing
right. And doing that in jiu-jitsu though, sometimes it's not good because it exposes the back.
Right. Yeah. Which is crazy. And that was kind of where I was going, is that, you look at this specialization of these sports, and it's awesome to see it because you can see how great they are at what they're doing. But at the same time, like, what's better, seeing somebody being as good at that one sport, or somebody that can, take all types of different sure. combat and be the champion from there. But then again,
I'm always a fan of the anomalies, that people that are specialists in one area, that have really spent their time mastering one craft and have the ability to be really, really, really good in other things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, I think that the evolution came from wanting to defend against the specialists.
Sure.
Right. So I need to learn a little bit about this. Right. And then over time.
Wasn't it Bruce Lee that kind of figured that out, because he kind of defied like his mentor, because he wanted to keep it one thing, and he realized you can't win a fight.
Yeah, I guess they call him kind of like the father of
Godfather.
MMA, Godfather.
Yeah. I don't know how true that is.
Great grandfather.
That's what they say.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
The old man of jiu-jitsu.
He would have been 80 now.
Wow.
That's crazy. So as a white belt,
I'm just remembering some old Bruce Lee conversations in the old academy
Mhm.
with a couple individuals. It's very spirited conversations about Bruce Lee. Hilarious, actually.
I just always think boards.
I know
Very
exactly.
polarizing.
I know who you're talking about too. Yeah.
I guess for anybody listening, there's people that are lauding Bruce Lee as the second coming of martial arts.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And then also just a glorified actor, just a nobody that just, I guess had good marketing.
Yeah.
do you
time
think
That's what they
right.
say too.
do you think the
See, I
video
think
of
it's a
him
crossroads of
playing
both.
ping pong with the nunchucks is real?
I don't know.
I think that's fake.
You think it's fake?
I think it's fake.
It's like a black and white.
But how would they
I've
fake
seen
that
that.
back then? How would you fake that footage?
That's what I mean.
When have you?
Yeah.
Did you not notice it? It didn't show up until like 2000s.
Well, I don't know.
all
I
right,
don't
so I
doubt
guess
it.
yeah.
People have done superhuman things that we would think are, absolutely impossible to do. It's like, how do you have the hand-eye coordination to do something like that? But, people can do some amazing shit. So,
Yeah, that was back then when people wanted to like get shot in the stomach with cannonballs and all that weird like
Magicians
yeah,
and shit.
yeah, like the weird stuff,
Bruce
right?
Lee's a magician. He's just fucking pretending to like
he also
ping
had
pong with
some-
nunchucks.
There was something else I couldn't think. It was something like that.
Bruce Wonderstone.
He did the finger punch thing. Like,
You think that was fake?
The
too?
1-inch punch.
1-inch
no,
punch.
One
I
inch
don't
punch.
know. I think I want to believe it. It's pretty cool. Like Bruce Lee's like the mythos behind him. He's kind of a legend.
He was
You know,
like
you
a little
wanna-
guy too.
He was only like 5'8" or something like that. Like
No, I think
buck
shorter than
45.
that.
He was like buck
Yeah.
45.
Yeah, soaking wet.
Yeah. But he was ripped. He just did that like dragon pose thing where he had like
The
wings.
cobra.
They
wings.
call
Yeah.
the Christmas tree.
I don't know. Yeah. That's
that
the
what
first
that
time
is?
Is
I
that
The
what it's called?
lats, yeah.
I
Upside down.
It's
thought
an
that's why
upside
they-
down
Right.
Christmas tree, yeah.
I thought that's why they called him the dragon, because it gave him like wings. I don't know. But I never heard
I
the
thought-
Christmas tree thing before. But that
Probably.
makes sense.
I was about to
too.
say. I think I thought of him as a dragon. And in my
He
head,
is
I'm like,
rather
it's a
pronounced
pretty racist.
latissimus dorsi.
He's a Christmas dragon.
He's a Christmas dragon. Yeah.
So because you were at such a high level in another martial art, doing jujitsu probably was not like a regular white belt. Like most white belts that walk into jujitsu that have never done anything like that before.
No,
like you
no.
you have already had contact. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you've had violence. You did MMA. So doing jujitsu is more like just trying a new sport. Like not very different from like for me walking into it, I was just blown away because I have never done a martial art before. It was just all baseball, basketball, football.
Sure.
Just doing those conventional sports. And then walking into jiu-jitsu, it's completely different. Like you got some dude over you.
That's true. I never thought of it that way.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
I was already used to being in close contact with people, sort of combat situations, and
it took me probably about a year to understand how to be aggressive, because for me, I was always, larger than
But how'd
other
you do
people.
that? How'd you do that playing football? I don't mean to cut you off,
Yeah.
but I have a question for it. But like, how'd you do that playing football?
Because when you're playing football, you're exploding through the ball. You're looking to put your head
Destroy somebody.
right into the ball and tackle the person. So you're looking to stop them from getting extra
How do you
yardage.
do that without?
There's a
hurting
definition.
them?
right.
There's a definition and there's an understanding of what you need to do to execute. In jiu-jitsu, it takes years to understand how to execute. So, for example, a knee cut pass.
Mhm.
You can explode like you're doing a baseball slide. I still can't do that. I'm still trying to figure that out because I don't want to destroy my partner because they may not be the same size I am. I'm 240
What do you
pounds.
think, Raji? You think you should just destroy them?
You're only going to teach them how to avoid it if it sucks that bad for them.
I mean, it depends like where and how you're doing the knee cut.
Yeah,
if you're
right.
knee cutting
So this is-
through their
Nuts.
groin. Yeah.
This is what I mean. Well, this is what I mean. I also felt the same way about knee on belly. Now I understand knee on belly. I understand how to put pressure on somebody's solar plexus. When,
That's different.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is like I'm rolling with somebody that is legit 100 pounds less than me, I could go ahead and push them and like be strong with them. And if they're good enough, obviously they're going to manipulate me just fine because they understand the body. But I could again be with a white belt, another white belt, for example, or another blue belt. And if I didn't understand my aggressiveness through the technique, well, I could destroy somebody, you know what I mean? Like by accident. I would never want to hurt. That's on my conscience all the time. It's always been that way. It was put in me like, Elijah, you're bigger. Don't hurt that person. You know, Elijah, you can't do that. You're bigger than him. I was always programmed that way.
Sure.
So now as an adult, like doing a martial art, and it's also in my nature. I'm not somebody to want to like, you know, I'm just not a fighter. You know, I go to diffuse stuff.
Well, I think one maybe piece of advice I think that would help bigger guys that I have sort of maintained in my own jiu-jitsu. I've always thought of trying to pretend that I was small and have a smaller person style, and not rely on my length so much. And you know, I'll use it obviously to keep somebody away and, you know, various spaces. But I focus on not so much creating so much space that I'm pushing someone off and away when I'm bigger and stronger, but not allowing them to close the distance any more than really what's necessary for me to work within a certain or given space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes bigger people, even when they're rolling with guys maybe of equal size or strength or bigger than them, tend to then think that they need to use that little like extra force when in reality you just need to block that extra space that you need to be able to work with.
Right.
You know, it's not about kind of moving them and launching them off of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it looks great and feels great. You know, you're like, oh yeah, thank God they're not going to be able to do anything. But then it's like, okay, well, you're neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So you have no grips. You have
like
no body
having a
positioning.
knee shield. Like having a knee shield and having somebody that's just dropping all their pressure on you,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that needle point as you move your knee so that you're going for the underhook.
Sure.
You're looking for the tiniest little bit of space. You don't need to be bench press them off or use your, you know, push away at all your frames just to get that space. You could actually just use a tiny little bit of space, just like you said, just enough. You don't need to use extra. Just enough.
I think Radji's phone went to sleep because his camera went out.
Oh, did it?
His phone's on.
No, it's on.
We don't have to worry about it too much because you're still on the microphone. But
I'll bring.
the people
I can
cannot
bring it
see
on.
you.
Oh, wait, there it
There
is.
you go.
There you go.
I guess when it fell and put it back up, I hit the button.
So yeah, that's interesting how you really didn't have to deal with that virginity, if you will, of like not knowing like what to think as like a white belt. You know what I mean?
He's been a competitor,
Right.
So that's a different element to it as well. So you can come in, you know, he's an athlete,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Everything I've always done, there's always some competitive aspect to it.
Yeah. So no, I'm sorry.
So so blue belt. When we were 2004, 2005, you had a hiatus for about like 4 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2009, that's when you found yourself at Princeton BJJ.
No, Brunswick.
Brunswick BJJ, excuse me. Where were you starting there? Were you blue belt yet?
I was a blue belt.
Okay, so you're a blue belt?
Yeah.
Fresh
Fresh
there.
No stripes.
Who's your professor there?
The head instructor there was Haas Ibrahim. He was a brown belt. It was a Ricardo Almeida affiliate school, Team Hensel Gracie. But yeah, Haas was a brown belt under Ricardo.
So do you have anything that stands out to you at blue belt?
Well, as far as what?
Anything, you know, training wise, you know, whether it's
You started
beginning
coaching
like
at Blue
growth.
Belt,
Did you
right?
coach?
I did. I started coaching at blue belt. Maybe not right away, but pretty soon after I started at Brunswick. I started there, I think maybe September of 2009, I want to say. And I was there for 4 years. Pretty much my entire blue belt. And then I was promoted to purple, earned 1 stripe on my purple. And then that like August of 2014, I left.
Okay. At this point, like, were you still doing MMA when you got your blue belt, or you're done?
No, I was done.
Okay.
I was done.
Yeah.
I had my last fight like the year before. First and only time I've ever been knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
I was done.
And so you were a 1-stripe purple belt, and where'd you go?
I started training with Jukal.
In Garwood?
Yeah, he was in Garwood.
Nice.
I knew so a couple. There were 3 Brazilian guys, George, Augusto, and Marcos. They were all students. Actually, I'm still in contact with 2 of them. I don't speak to George as much. He's in Brazil, but once in a while, a shout out to him. But Marcos, I still speak to. He's come to the academy a few times to the new place. But they had left the school. They had like a falling out with the head instructor, and Marcos was like, "Dude, you got to come meet this guy, Jukal. He's in Garwood." Jukal was like a 3rd degree black belt at the time when I first met him, and this was like 2009. And I was a blue belt, and I would go visit sometimes just, to go train. And he was always just very, nice and welcoming, and, didn't really ask for, anything. And it was always just like, this is Marcos' American friend, coming to train. And that was it.
And they're like, they're very Brazilian, and they don't speak good English and whatnot.
No, the 3 guys
well?
broke. Yeah. Marcos speaks English. He it's maybe not perfect, but he can they all speak English well.
So Jukal, he was a 3-stripe 3rd degree when you
and then probably newly promoted to 4th. And then I was with him through basically his 5th degree, and then most recently, right before I left, his 6th degree promotion.
And then you got your black belt in what year?
I did. I got my black belt in 2015.
So I was like 11 years.
December of 2015.
Took you like 11 years to get your black belt?
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you're now 2nd degree. You just got it this year, right?
I am. Yeah, this past December.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 7
That's
years
awesome.
of black belt. Yeah, it went by very quickly.
And when you get your black belt, it's what,
Almost.
3 years? And then
It's 3 years for the first 3 degrees, so 3, 6, 9, and then every 5 years for 4th, 5th, and 6th, so 5, 5, and 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then
it's 7 and 7, and then 10 years.
You gotta be
something like that.
80.
Yeah, I'll be, I think, 67 when I'm eligible for a coral belt.
Okay.
Something like that.
That's feasible.
Yeah, it's feasible. Definitely feasible. I just immediately was like, damn, you're gonna be fucking old. Like, you gotta be anybody in general. Just old by the time you get,
Oh yeah,
it's crazy.
You see anybody with multiple stripes. It was I never really had an opportunity to train with black belts a lot, growing up. My first introduction was with a black belt, but it was like kind of short-lived, it was kind of on and off and then stopped. I trained with another black belt when I was living in Brooklyn, Felipe Nover. He was like really big on the regional scene. He was a Ring of Combat champion. He ended up fighting in the UFC. I don't know. He was, I think, pushed a little bit quick into the spotlight. At the time they lauded him as like the next Anderson Silva, but at like lightweight. So it was like a lot of pressure on him. Yeah, Phil was like really, really good. Had a karate background, kickboxing. Actually, he was another Alex Soka black belt as well. And I trained with him at an MMA academy in Brooklyn. Learned a lot from him. Actually, that's at that same academy. That's where I met Gary St. Ledger and his brother Harry.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, you've met a lot of
years.
You've met a lot of people through jiu-jitsu too, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Good people. I'm lucky. I've the connections that I've made, have been with really solid people. The people that are continually in my life are solid people, and I believe they're, still around in my life for a reason. And the ones that aren't, are not for a reason.
Yeah, man. That's just the way it goes, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. That's good.
So I have like, there are a bunch of random questions.
Okay.
They're like kind of all over the place, but I wanted to walk through them and then like let's see where we go with some of these. Like maybe they branch out a little bit, maybe they don't, and got a nice list for you. So
okay.
So we'll start on Why don't we start on the fundamentals question? Ed, this is not your question. I've done this to you already, asking you to ask it. But maybe I'll just do it. So we've been arguing too about this. Shiv gave me a way to ask it, but I can't remember. I was drinking. But from a fundamental standpoint, starting with white belt and walking through each belt, what would you believe? And obviously, and I think we talked about this a little bit, it could change with people, but maybe just from a very like broad perspective, what do you think each belt level should be focusing on from a fundamental standpoint? I know it's a tough one. And it's funny because we've argued more about the question than the actual answer.
Yeah, that's a really difficult answer because that purely depends on the person, on the individual.
It was a question that was asked on me, and I said the same thing to you.
At white belt, I don't know. I had personally, I have certain parameters, to promote someone to blue belt. Mm-hmm. Blue belt promotion isn't, it's not a terribly difficult promotion. It does take a little bit of time. I feel like the blue belt promotion is more of I don't know, a mental breakthrough promotion than a technical one. Because the white belt, like the person who's first comes in, is sometimes and often like apprehensive. They don't really know what to expect. They're not retaining. Well, they don't feel like they're retaining the information at all. They don't really feel like they're getting better. Like it's a difficult time, kind of through that promotion, and sort of getting that promotion kind of signifies to that person like, wow, okay, I have done something so far. The stripes sort of help, but the blue belt promotion, I don't know. For me, I think it's more of like a mental thing than a technical. Now there's certainly technical aspects that someone needs to have. They have to have a basic understanding of every position in jiu-jitsu. They don't have to be a specialist by any means, but they have to recognize like when their back is being taken. They have to know what a guard pass is and how to pass guard. They know how to, they know a couple of sweeps. They know a couple of submissions. They don't need to know them well, but at least, the attempt, the recognition of, okay, I can grab here and I can start to work to this space. That's the progress that I want to see a white belt work through, towards blue belt. They shouldn't be like transitioning, a whole lot. I mean, if they are, then, they're a special person, and then those are the rare ones, that might even progress a little bit faster.
I was thinking it's different for everybody as well, because you have to kind of get a read on people, like competitors, like wrestlers, for example. They're going to come in, they're going to have more of an attack mentality. That might get them in trouble, but that helps them in the long run.
They also might learn a lot faster. Wrestlers are really good, obviously understanding of takedowns, really good understanding of top positioning, even guard passing without knowing any technical guard passes, because they're used to spinning, around the back and spinning around the body, to get to the back, to get to the body lock.
They know how to pressure
or to pin. They know how to keep their chest down. So they can scramble, well, they're black belts in like the dogfight position. So that people like that can definitely be promoted certainly a lot faster, at least the early stages. Once you start getting into, the finer details of jiu-jitsu, the sweeping, the gripping, that stuff, then it tends to slow down a little bit.
So I like how you said like the breakthrough, because you break through and like you said, you have those concepts, those jiu-jitsu concepts, but like you as a person, like start to break through. Like it's like, I'm sure you see that, like you have that lens where you can, and of course others see it too. They're like, yeah, he's a blue belt now, or yeah, he's a purple belt now, and they haven't.
And you tend to feel it,
and you feel it.
Every belt promotion I received, I felt like it was time. You kind of feel it when you Not even when you train with your own, members in the academy, because sometimes you get used to certain styles, but still, I mean, people are, if they're technically good, you're always going to have a challenge, even if you're used to training with people.
Yeah.
And you know what they do, we always get visitors. So there was always a time when I would be training with other people. And then there's always that gauge, I'd be lying to say that, when you train, you're not going to measure yourself up against somebody else and their ability and the belt that's around their waist. You're going to look at and feel, well, how do I compare to them? And that's a natural thing to do. That's a hard thing to get away from. I see bad? Amanda's question. I think that's actually my answer.
Well, that's the only way to measure, right? You have to have a baseline, otherwise there is no measurement. So you don't, there has to be some sort of comparison.
There has to,
Yeah.
And
we've had this conversation on the podcast before, going from white to blue belt. And I think that, you've shown a commitment, right? You've been there for a while. You speak the language now, so you can be coached a little easier. You can understand if a third person is watching you, you can take action if you can hear them, if you can pay enough attention. You can take direction.
I'm even noticing that with a couple of the white belts that are, being really consistent, trying to prepare for the tournament next month and, trying to help them through roles. And, I try to let people just kind of roll and not, coach too much unless it kind of lends in that occasion. But I've noticed that even some of the white belts do a very good job of listening. And I think just my students in general actually are seem to be very coachable, maybe even not initially, but grow into being very coachable people. I've never had an issue where like somebody didn't listen. I was in one tournament once that like caused a few of us into a frenzy because he wasn't listening. But afterwards he sort of it changed sort of his dynamic, also his dynamic with me, his ability to listen to me too. Sometimes that was also his first competition, so sometimes it's hard to be able to
you get like those tunnel ears, man. It's hard. And then you can only, it's like you almost can't even hear.
Yeah. So we talked about that classification for a promotion from white to blue. What about from blue to purple?
Blue to purple for me is a much longer time period. I think blue and purple are two of the most important belts in jiu-jitsu. White belt is sort of just like a figuring out phase. Like you don't know what you don't know, and you're just trying things. You're trying to remember what the concepts are and piece things together. Sometimes you're able to understand, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you see the opportunity, but you're not fast enough. You're like the timing's off. So it's just like a figuring out phase. Blue belt is a time where you're really understanding and figuring out your jiu-jitsu for me. You're kind of honing into what techniques at white belt you gravitate towards, those techniques that you use more, and kind of formulating your style and your game. That's like the really fundamental growing up phase of jiu-jitsu promotion for me is that blue belt phase. I think that's why, for me, most blue belts, it's the longest rank. It's the longest belt.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the one you really find yourself at blue belt, I feel like, because you're really
for sure. And by the time you're a purple belt, you should have a pretty, well formulated game, for the most part. There's still some missing pieces.
Of course.
But you have a good transition.
I was just gonna say, would you agree that it's like almost important, like the most important thing in blue belt for me anyway? I really tried, like I always went for submissions throughout my jiu-jitsu tenure, but I really tried understanding how to cut through and get to every position, whether it was to the back, understanding from like guard, open guard, to get past that to side control, to north south, to get to the back, like really understand those avenues. Like that's where I tried like really putting all my focus in. Would you agree that's what blue belts should be doing?
Absolutely. Blue and into my purple is when I started figuring out like how to arm lock everybody from everywhere, not just from one position.
Right.
It was like, let me do it from close guard, let me do it from side control, let me do it from mount, which was one of my worst positions for a while. I was never able to armbar anybody from mount until like brown belt.
Dude, it's tough. I always get tossed off too, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I would get to the position, and then the second I'd go to swing my leg, or like my weight would be off, something would be off. Just took a long time.
So yeah, I'm still not much of a mount. I really don't like to be there. I end up dismounting. Yeah.
It's an easy place for me. Not easy, but it's comfortable.
Yeah, how often
because
you get there, buddy?
I have work. I get there. I get there a decent amount of time. I don't like staying there though. I really am Neon Belly. I like to be at Neon Belly. I'd like to travel side to side. I like to know that I can go north south. I like when people attack the Neon Belly and I go Neon Chest and I see the freak out from my partner. They'll be like, oh,
I like how earlier you were saying I don't want to hurt anybody, but now he's like, yeah.
Well,
like,
I
just
understand.
Seeing a life leave their eyes.
I just understand what I could do with the pressure now. So brown belt now.
That's pretty cool.
So your brown belt promotion. What are you looking for? What are you looking for there from a person?
The brown belt?
Yeah. From purple to brown?
Yeah.
So I guess what do you expect out of a purple belt?
Well,
so a tighter, more refined purple belt, somebody who's able to transition much more seamlessly, way like much less gaps in their transition moves. Something doesn't work, they're on to something else. They're not just one or two moves working, they're 3, 4, 5 moves
all
working all at the same time. Yeah, that's a good brown belt. And also a brown belt, someone who, and when I like to train with all my students, and a good brown belt also shouldn't be letting me pass guard very easily. I shouldn't be able to pass brown belt's guard, with one attempt or two attempts, one angle change.
Right.
There should be some transitions that I have to use to be able to pass your guard.
Right. And I may articulate this the wrong way, but I also feel like you promoting somebody to brown belt. I mean, with any belt, they have to be there.
Yeah.
But I think with brown belt, it's like more of like you're here. Like you're one of my people.
Absolutely. A great representative of the school and what I've been teaching for the last 7, 8 years, up until that promotion,
right.
However long it is.
How has it felt to promote to black?
It's awesome.
Is it almost surreal? Do you think it's as surreal for you as it is the person receiving the belt?
Probably. I'm still blown away by it. Promoting Tom and Steve.
Yeah,
they're great guys. Great at jiu-jitsu. Great black belts. They represent to me what any black belt should be. If there's a definition of what a black belt is, and then you have like adjectives. And then you have like descriptions, like they
both
cover all
awesome.
of that. They cover that, all of it.
They're like definitely like when you see them on the mat, they're like, you just know like they're like the most awesome practitioners and people like.
And it's not about sport jiu-jitsu. It's not he doesn't have an omoplata sweep. It's like. These guys are both great at jiu-jitsu. They're black belts in jiu-jitsu. They're my black belts in jiu-jitsu. But they're actually two guys that, if need be, could both defend themselves on the street 100% if they needed to.
Yeah.
Steve's fought MMA. Like,
he's a beast, man.
Yeah, these are guys that
we all know
absolutely protect themselves and absolutely transfer knowledge and do to the students 100%.
It's the people they've become too
thankful.
Through jiu-jitsu too. I think plays a part in
absolutely
because of like how they, like Tom's a scary dude, but he's a controlled monster in there.
Absolutely,
and he only got better at doing that, and like his technique is awesome now. And he used to be just like a savage, like just a scary guy. You know what I mean? But like. He like honed in and controlled that. And now he could just like you don't feel hurt when you're getting beat up. It's like
they had a great time at the TAC team day when I promoted him. I was upset. I was like a little torn about the promotion. You know, a few people knew that they were getting promoted. I always love doing promotions in front of the students and everything, because that's, you know, that's your family. It's who you train with, and that's who would celebrate it the most. You know, but also at the same time, I'm not a third stripe yet, and I still follow the tradition of, you know, I'm not going to promote a black belt, you know, without Jared there. You know, not that I need his approval. I don't, you know, I don't. He doesn't say, well, let me check this person out.
Well, it's like
Roger, who you promoting, and all right, here, I'll sign off on it. But it's also a respect thing, the respect and traditional sort of aspect of it. So, and also there were, you know, I knew there were going to be at least like 60 black belts there,
which
and
is
it would
pretty
be an
awesome.
occasion for both of them. I know Steve doesn't get a chance to really get out, you know, outside of our school much, you know, even outside of, you know, day classes, you know, for his schedule. So it's nice when he's there at night, let alone to be able to train with 60 black belts he's never met.
I think it was pretty special.
And the same thing for Tom too. So it was funny though, Jack. I was sitting there, and they were sitting on the side, and I thought there was going to be other brown belts there. But apparently Steve and Tom were the only two people being promoted to black belt out of all the schools.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Jared's like, so Raj, you got two guys to promote today? And I stood up and I was like, cat's out of the bag.
It's obvious now.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I called him up and promoted him. It was cool though. They were both pretty shocked.
I wonder what was going through their mind when they first got there and just saw nothing but black belts. Like,
Yeah.
They must have thought something was up, but it was still a shock because they're like, wait a minute.
No, it can't be.
No, right? The brown belts are showing up at some point, right, Steve?
Yep.
Tom? Yeah.
But it was a great experience for them.
No, dude, that's honestly, man, like, yeah, that would have been really cool if it was at the school, no doubt. But, like, that's pretty fucking cool, too. Like, to do it in front of, like, 60 black belts. It's like, whoa. Now you're part of this.
What is that? That's gotta feel, because I know that probably wasn't your first time being in a room with that many skilled individuals. But what is that like?
No, so I actually, Jared invited me to. They had a tag team day that summer of 2019. Actually, that August before I left Team Jucao. It was like a month before I left. He was like, just come, you know, because I had asked Jared, I was like, just consulting him about just the situation with Jucao, how I was feeling, you know, as the months went by, just as a friend, you know, and, you know, he just kind of was like, you know, good luck, basically. How do I do this? How do I, you know, make amends? How do I approach this? And he was basically just like, yeah, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah.
At least he was honest.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on here. So physical demand. Jiu-jitsu is a very physically demanding sport. For your students and any listener out there, what would you do to take that physical demand on? What type of advice would you give to somebody who's just starting or maybe has been doing the sport for some time?
Maintain like some kind of light, low impact stretching and strength training routine.
Do you like to tell people, or let me rephrase that,
because jiu-jitsu is like impactful enough,
right?
So like I get the idea of wanting to be stronger, you know, but deadlifting 400 pounds and then making such quick explosive movements on the mat, you know, sure, it can help in some competitive aspect, but, you know, I always think of like long-term too, and just real life, not just, you know, what awards you're going to win in a 3-year period. And then that's it. It's like, okay, what are you going to do after that? Because, you know, nobody really cares anyway.
When I,
other than you. I don't mean to downplay anybody's
no
achievements, but honestly, that's the truth. Is, you know, the only value that it has is the value that you place on it.
Right. When I got hurt with a toe hold that day, I was deadlifting, and I even thought to myself, I was like, why would I, you know, put such strain on myself when I'm going to go train?
Yeah.
And it's because I have this mentality that I've grown up with. Oh, you know, be a man. Like just go do
it's
it.
also the competitive aspect of it. It's like naturally once you achieve a certain level, right, you're going to try to do more, right? If you're a pitcher and you can throw 60, aren't you going to try to throw 65? And then when you throw 65, aren't you going to try to throw 70? You're going to try to throw faster and harder every time. So I think the same thing with like, you know, weightlifting or, you know, something like that incorporated, you know, the stronger you get, you're going to want to continue to more. So I think you're going to have a lot of self-discipline, like I said, to just maintain a very like more low impact sort of maintenance routine rather than trying to, you know, become the Incredible Hulk.
Right.
You know, if that's your thing, then that's your thing. But, you know, just for, like I said, just long-term overall strength and health, that's probably, you know, the best way to go for the average person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anyone would find like resistance band training and range of motion and flexibility like super beneficial to their jiu-jitsu and their injury resilience as well, especially the resistance band stuff for your joints.
Something that I made as a routine. That's probably something else I would tell my white belt self, you know, because when I, you know, in my mid-20s, it's not an issue. If something hurts or you know, I pull something
so much faster.
It's 2 days later, I'm back to normal 100%, you know, so you don't think about those things. It's like, oh, why am I going to spend the time to do this when I don't need to? Nothing bothers me right now. You know, that's also another thing is like the more proactive approach and preventative. You know, now I'm in a situation where even, you know, my own body is, you know, changed, and looking back, it's like, you know, shit, I wish I had done, you know, certain things for the last 15 years and maybe I wouldn't have like the back issues that I have now. And, you know, it is what it is, but
I mean, it also could be just due to like not getting it taken care of sooner, like or finding it out, you know. I mean, there's different variables
combination
to that.
Of things.
I got a couple of questions from some other people for you, but
here, bring your mic up.
How would you describe your style of jiu-jitsu?
Oh,
who's that from?
My style of jiu-jitsu. Good question. Not really like stealthy. I'm not like a tricky person in that sense. Like I don't do things that like you've never seen before.
No, you see it coming.
No, you're way more methodical. You're almost like
super methodical.
You're like the python that got the bite, and you just see yourself like, oh man, I'm done.
I'm being swallowed slowly,
and he's laughing at me.
I mean, that's how I could describe his, you know, metaphorically. Yeah. That's how I could describe your style. Yeah. But like, I mean, do you feel like you have? Maybe I could.
I feel
try
I
to better
have.
Ask this question,
man, it's
a tough one.
I don't know if I have I mean, the style of jiu-jitsu, half guard is my style, I guess, you know. But I utilize anything in any moment. I believe use whatever's best in that moment, kind of style.
You're working with what's given to you too.
Also, I'm like, you know, sort of a Bruce Lee approach of jiu-jitsu, if you will.
No, I like that because I kind of have a similar style. I've always just worked on what's given to me anyway. Because it's like,
I mean, there's certain positions that I prefer and that I gravitate to, and that I use that I like to go to initially. But yeah, I'll use whatever, you know, whatever is necessary.
All right. I got another question.
Okay.
What are your favorite grapplers, or you know, grappler or grapplers that you like to watch? Maybe all time or current.
Andre Gracie.
Okay.
Love to watch. I used to watch a lot of Andre Galvao when I was like a purple belt. Huge influence, like probably Andre Galvao.
I do remember you telling me that.
Probably those two are the two biggest like jiu-jitsu influences.
Wow.
Yeah. Adolfo Vieira a little bit. Probably more recently, Lucas Lepri.
Yeah, he's a beast.
I learned so much in passing from him in two seminars. Did 2 seminars, and almost like a 90-minute private lesson with him. a few years back. He was getting ready to prepare for Worlds, and I was visiting my grandparents at the time, and I was it's funny because I was a little bent out of shape about the price of the mat fee. I was like, man, like he knows me, he's still gonna charge me this, but all right, like I'll pay it. So I was a little like upset, and then we did the warm up, and I was still kind of like salty, and then he called me over. He called me over with one of his other black belts. And me, him, and one of his other black belts basically did 10-minute rounds, round robin for 90 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was like the training for the day.
Oh, it's so
yeah,
cool.
So I learned so much. And he answered questions afterwards. I was like, I can normally stop people when they do this, but like how, like, what are you doing? Like, kind of felt the grip, but how'd you set it up? And he like answered every question, helped with my knee cut. Like, yeah, he was awesome.
Well, I have another question, but this could be answered by what you just went through because it sounds pretty awesome. But what's your best memory ever of training?
That's probably one of them. And honestly, the first time I ever trained with Jukal.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. First time I ever rolled with him was like one of the most special
ones
I've had.
Just as like it was probably just as mesmerizing as it was for me the first time.
Because my approach to jiu-jitsu is very not aggressive at all. Actually, I had a very sort of like gentle style. Even as a blue belt, I wasn't really like wild or crazy. But training with him, it was like an aha moment. Like, oh, this is what jiu-jitsu is. Like, this is what it is. When they tell you the maximum like pressure, but with like the most amount of efficiency and precision. And no wasted effort. I was like, oh, this is it. You know, this is.
It doesn't even seem like there's athleticism. It's just like
what I'm going to strive for, basically.
Yeah, there is some other level there that you do realize, like, oh man, there's just levels to black belt.
Well, I had never been put in a situation where someone was on top of me and I didn't have any pressure on me, but I couldn't move.
Yeah.
Like it didn't make any sense. Like every time I move, like there's just something blocking, but he's not holding me tight. I don't feel any pressure. It's just, it was unbelievable.
Nice. I think I have. So this is from the other half.
Okay.
What are your future plans for the academy?
Oh, my future plans for the academy. I would want to continue to grow the academy. I would love to have an actual competition team. People that are going to go out and not only represent the school, but represent themselves and build a name and a reputation and a legacy, if you will, for themselves. In that way. And I want to help be a part of that to help, teach someone how to become a champion. There's people that want to compete, but, like, what do you really want to do with the competition? Do you want to just do some competitions just so you can kind of gauge your game, so you can make little improvements, but that's it? Or is there and that's totally fine. Or do you
be a competitor that wants to win gold and like open up your own academy and make a name for yourself type of thing? And that's kind of what you want.
And not that like the competition team has to be people that are only, minded in that way. But, I absolutely want a team. You
want to breed some of those out
absolutely.
of it.
I want to branch students out of my school and academy that, have accomplished things. I've been fortunate to be disciplined and talented enough and hardworking enough to accomplish a lot of things in my life, and I know what it's done for me. And I would love for my students to be able to do something with their life in a similar way. And if I can facilitate that in some way, that's it for me. That's the best.
That's like the ultimate dream.
That's the ultimate. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could see that. That's cool. What would you say? Here's a good question. I think this is a question for maybe all of us to like ponder about. But where do you see jiu-jitsu being in the next 10 years in our society? And like, do you think it's going to change overall?
I don't think it's going to change much. I think it'll fluctuate a little bit, in its popularity. there's so many different like tournaments and avenues of jiu-jitsu. There's not one standard thing that it is.
Mm-hmm.
You can call jiu-jitsu so many different things, and not just like gi and no gi. Within those two things, there's so many other rule sets and other parts of it. I think that's what, like, judo's, it's you know, the Japanese were smart. They just, you know, held on to it and were like, nope, it's not going to change.
Yeah, the rules have always been the same.
It's just going to be like,
do you think that's why judo is an Olympic sport and jiu-jitsu hasn't become, because they can't figure out a rule set for it, essentially?
Yeah, I think so.
That sucks, because that would probably be the biggest.
Yeah,
that would I guarantee you that would turn into one of the bigger things in the Olympics if they put that in there, if they could get their shit together.
Yeah.
And come up with like a
there's got to be some sort of solid standard.
I was just about to ask. So you think that there's a chance that it'll get added? I mean, it seems to be one of the most, if not the most popular martial.
It's becoming super popular,
especially here in the United States.
Especially worldwide.
Here in the United States,
I think here in the United States it's
way more than elsewhere,
and
it's
and
still
like
not
UK
like
is,
really big in other places.
I was gonna say, doesn't European have a big scene now?
They do, but it's still nothing like the United States.
Yeah, because the Brazilians came here. They came here to launch, you know, what has been going on since what?
There's good jiu-jitsu in other places. It's just it's not as prevalent. It's not as popular.
Makes sense.
I asked you about the physical strain, and you know, it's funny because we always talk about the mental aspect of jiu-jitsu and how, you know, we get this clarity when we're done training and whatnot. But for a lot of people that are, you know, trying to elevate their game, there is a mental strain, especially when, you know, people feel like they've plateaued, or they're, you know, trying to figure out what's my next step. What do I have to do next? So what would you tell those people that were looking at that aspect of jiu-jitsu?
That's an individual conversation, I guess, for each person, because I don't know, some people are maybe missing different things at certain times of their training. I think sometimes people, it's just maybe a motivational thing. Sometimes it's more of like an encouragement or a reinforcement of the progress that they're making. And that might include even pointing out certain aspects of their training, and pointing out good things that they're doing, specific things, you know, to help them sort of understand or realize that they are making progress. You know, good instructors should be able to be in tune with all of their students in that way and know exactly, you know, what they need in those moments.
Right. And I know what you mean, because it's like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, well, in your half guard, it could be as simple.
You need to work your guard passing more.
Right.
Like, I don't know, sometimes it is a very clear-cut example. I was actually, I don't remember who I was talking to, but recently, maybe a couple of days ago, I was training with Chukal. I was a brown belt. And after the round, he just kind of like smiled, and I was like, you know, what are you smiling about? And he was like, you're getting very good, and you know, I like, you know, what you're doing with your half guard. And he's like, you know, your half guard's very hard to pass on the right side. You know, he was like, you know, you can pretty much, you know, defend almost 100%, you know, on that side. But he goes, when I force you to your left side, he's like, it's like a birthday present for me. So it was like it was an eye opener, a little bit of a shocker, you know, to my ego a little bit, you know, because, you know, you have to be able to be honest with yourself in jiu-jitsu, and you also have to be able to take like honest, not necessarily criticism, but an honest assessment of your jiu-jitsu. Like, no, you're not good at guard passing, and you need to work on that. Or, you know, you're still laying flat. You know, you can't not be truthful to somebody when you're helping them out in jiu-jitsu. You can't just say, oh yeah,
can't lie on the mats.
Like, no, like that's not doing anybody any service.
Right.
You don't have to tell them that they suck, but
So do you think
You could do it many different, easier ways.
course.
You know,
So you guys
softer
know how
ways.
to do that.
so do you think jiu-jitsu should be an elective in schools? Do you think that jiu-jitsu should be mandatory for
Well,
law
I know.
enforcement?
I think the United Arab Emirates, they instituted jujitsu into their school curriculum,
Mhm.
so it's part of their day, like a gym class.
That's
I think it should
Yeah.
be. I think
Oh,
it's-
absolutely.
It just will instill confidence in all the kids.
If you put a martial arts class in school, you'd probably almost
Negate all fighting.
single-handedly negate all fighting and single-handedly eliminate bullying to some degree. Maybe not completely, because
You're never going to.
there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be.
I also think
just
there should be
shitheads.
bullying. I think it builds people to, you know,
It does. I mean, it's bullying.
Ed is
just
pro-bullying.
He's
a little bit. No, like obviously we're in an age where it's worse because social media. Hey man,
You said it. man.
He's
I'm
pro
just saying.
bully.
I'm not denying it.
Oh, man, I'm dying.
So what would you say to a student that wished he or she had more time to ask you questions?
What would I say to somebody? Say that one more time.
What would you say to a student that wished that they had more time to ask you questions? Because when you get to pick your
Then that's
brain.
their bad, man. That's your. I'm accessible. I'm there during the time, and if you don't ask a question, that's your effing fault.
There you go. So
there's never a question that I'm not going to answer.
Mm.
There might be something that somebody might ask that I feel like, listen, focus on this for now. That's a great question, but focus on this first, and then we'll cover that. Or sometimes focus on this, and you'll understand the answer to the question you have.
Mhm.
Or it could be like you're not ready for that yet. I get in some way.
Right.
And I'm not really a big believer in like not teaching someone and saying, well, you're not ready for this because it's quote unquote too advanced. If someone wants to learn something, teach it to them. They might learn it, they might not.
Mhm.
Sometimes the concept might be too abstract or too advanced for them to know at an earlier stage,
Mhm.
but techniques and stuff, no, I teach everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course.
Awesome.
Why hold it back? Eventually it'll come back around. That's what
Absolutely.
jujitsu basically is. It's like you just learn shit on like the 8th, 10th, 20th time
Mhm.
back around.
Well, I
if
laugh
not
to
more.
myself all the time because people, we go over stuff, and it's like, and I'm not saying that like I'm certainly not the only source of my students' jiu-jitsu knowledge. There's a large portion of it, but it's stuff that is kind of like three ways, right? It's me, knowledge coming from me, knowledge coming from your training partners, right? Whether they're talking to you about it or you're just kind of figuring out in real time, or things that like you're just plain old figuring out yourself,
Mhm.
or
Troubleshooting.
or online instructionals,
Cheville's got a good
competition video, that kind of stuff. That's really where your knowledge is coming from.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you're training in an academy 4 days a week, at 2 hours, 2 hours plus a clip, that's 8, 9, 10 hours a week of training jiu-jitsu sometimes for some people,
Mhm.
or even 6 hours, 6 to 10 hours, that's a lot of time invested into one thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I would say like remember what you want to ask too. Whether you type it a note in your phone or whatever it is. Maybe.
Well, whenever I teach private lessons of white belts, I always suggest keeping a notebook.
Mhm.
I kept a notebook. I would say exclusively at blue belt. I also recorded most of my training sessions. I'd set up a little HD camera on the desk right in front of the mat, and I would record every training session almost every night. I'd go home and watch it, just delete the video, and then next day. I never kept a file of it. I probably should have. But it was just for my own just knowledge that day. Like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. I never do that. Why did I do that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's a reason why all major sports rely so heavily in coaching and practice on film, because seeing yourself from the third person perspective provides so much infinite wisdom that you just can't get from somebody even describing what you're doing. You can get it to a certain extent, but maybe even if it's as far as 95, you're not going to get 100% when you see yourself doing it, because that's your body, it's your emotion. And then you're like, oh yeah, I remember back how that felt. I rember why or what happened right after memory. That. Yeah. So when you see it, you're engaging your huge, mental and your muscle memory.
Improvement in my swimming when they started filming too, because when I was younger, they didn't really do a whole lot of filming of stroke and stuff, but then they started putting cameras and stuff, underneath the pool, so you could see your stroke underneath the water as well as on top.
So you can see.
Then you can literally break down the angle. Like okay, look, you're more at a 15. You should be at a 20. Like you can actually see the science, the mathematics behind your body mechanics.
Yep.
So Cheville has a good question here. How important do you think it is to study jiu-jitsu in your free time? And any thoughts on how to approach studying jiu-jitsu?
I love his avatar, by the way.
Sure. I think
just like him.
With no face.
I don't know. It seems like a vague answer, but I think it's important to study jiu-jitsu in your free time if that's what you feel you need to do to make your jiu-jitsu better. Like if you're at a stage in your jiu-jitsu where you have a good understanding enough that you can kind of like study random things and learn by watching, then you can do that. I don't think that people necessarily need to study jiu-jitsu to get better. Like for example, I didn't really study a lot of like instructionals or anything like coming up through jiu-jitsu at all. My learning and figuring things out was purely from either what I was taught from someone else or figuring out on my own. Because you had asked about who my instructor was at Brunswick, and Haas, who's a great. I owe a lot to him, but he had another job, and he was there for like the first couple of years, and then the last like couple of years I was there, he wasn't really there much, so I didn't really have like a mentor, an instructor in that way. He was like on top of me and saying, no, don't do this, Radji, you need to do it like that. Another couple guys in the school basically all kind of troubleshooted with each other. It was me, this guy Miguel, he owns Montgomery Jiu-Jitsu, Montgomery BJJ. This other guy Don, Don's a physical therapist. This other kid Matt. It was pretty much us, and Gordon at the time was a blue belt, and then Gary Tonin would stop in once in a while. He wasn't really like a full-time guy there yet.
Kind of piggyback off like his question a little bit, maybe not so much, but like what stage of jiu-jitsu, maybe it's always, but it's imperative to go in with intent when you're training, like where you're really going after something in particular to work on something that
for sure. I think you need to be at a certain level to do that.
Yeah. I think so too, because like
that was my thought.
Just tell a white belt like, oh, just work on arm locks, and like I just learned one.
Maybe
last
it's not.
week.
Maybe it's not.
What does that mean?
Maybe it's not arm locks, but like
or
intent.
Just work on retaining guard. Even that concept alone to a new student.
You already have to have a basis of a foundational basis and understanding of what you're doing and why and where that leads to in order to be able to say where I'm making the mistakes and then how am I going to get through that, right?
Exactly. And I think on how to approach studying jiu-jitsu, I don't know. I guess if the information isn't like readily available to you at that time and you need to know, then look it up. Look up people that you admire their, I guess, competitive achievement, or I don't know, maybe somebody that you respect from afar. Choose somebody like that, someone's jiu-jitsu that you can relate to, maybe somebody's style that's similar to you in that sense.
I would also just think that's just like any
I've
other
done that
research.
for students before. They've asked certain questions and about certain positions, and I'm like, well, as a whole, I can certainly answer those questions for you, but here, take a look at these three people. Go watch their game, and you can understand how it's applied in these situations. They do things a little differently, but like this answers your question so
Right.
much, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes watching someone else do it and then coming back and doing it with me also helps too. So
Mhm.
So in competition, for the kids, at what age are they separated by male and female?
it depends on the tournament. Because Ayana did a Grappling Industries tournament last year and she was paired up against 3 other boys.
Right.
The NJBJJF, I think, separates them at like 8, I want to say, maybe 10.
This is because, like,
I think at 8.
like from
That should be the oldest that boys and girls compete against each other.
yeah,
8 years old is like max.
and
Max.
so I don't know if we've discussed it on the show before, but like obviously training as adults, training with
You can train
males
together,
and females,
but not compete against
you
each
get
other.
a lot out of that. But yeah, competing, it just doesn't make any sense
No.
to be competing.
When I swam, with there was no like men's practice and women's practice. We trained together. We were in the same lane, same sets, same practices,
right,
same time frames. You know, whatever. There was no separation.
you can learn a
But we
lot
didn't compete
from
against
each other, but competing against each other now you've
well, especially a combat art like jiu-jitsu.
right, like it. I'm about to sneeze. Like it wouldn't make sense to take a 120-pound female and have it faced against a 120-pound male. It just, you're not going to have the same muscle groups and size for that fight. Even lung capacity,
No,
is different.
that's like a pre-pubescent boy.
Like now thinking, and I'm thinking about this obviously because everything we're seeing in sports today, and with and now with having a daughter, I remember having the conversation with you about Ayana, and I was mad. I was like, what the hell? Like there's such
I
difference.
felt she would have had a better experience, had she even lost to 3 girls. But like the boys were tough, and you can tell they were much stronger than her. They were all 12, so there's a difference between a 12-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl physically. They're starting to get a little testosterone.
What are you talking about?
So I have a little bit more of a
she had a rough day. She was tough.
That
She was-
sucks, yeah.
So I have a little bit more of a personal question when it
Sure.
comes to competing. I've never asked you this before, so I've said it here before that I don't have a bug to compete, and
Okay.
I think it's because I've just competed in a lot of different other sports,
You don't have to.
and I love the competition I have in the school
In the academy.
and with priorities with life and whatnot.
If that's sufficient
It's-
enough for you and that fulfills you, then there's nothing more than you need to do.
And that's kind of what I was going to ask. How does that affect me in my growth in jiu-jitsu and
None
me
whatsoever.
as
None.
none? Right.
Not competing or competing and winning everything and competing and losing everything has zero bearing on your jiu-jitsu or level of jiu-jitsu and your future in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
None
Yeah.
whatsoever.
It's just, if I do, it's going to be under 220. I got to get under 220 because I don't feel like facing somebody that's like, like I could go up against somebody that's 6'8", 260.
Well, competing for me is about proving something to yourself. It's nothing that you have to prove to anybody else. And if you feel like you don't have to prove anything to yourself, then you don't have to compete.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of people out there that feel like they have to prove something to themselves, and that's why they compete, and that's why they continue to compete. That's why I've always continued to compete, because I've always wanted to prove that I was actually getting better, or that I was better than somebody else. Not in a malicious way, but it's just in a competitive.
Is that the ego?
For sure. I hate to lose.
So
I've always wanted to be the best.
So while it's important to you have to have like a line with your ego, right? Like you can't give it all up.
Yeah.
Well, you won't improve if you don't have an ego. The ego makes you get better in anything that you do.
Right. But you can't let the
That
ego
doesn't mean
stop
you
you
can't
from
be-
putting yourself in bad positions and being submitted.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's just that you don't want your ego to I don't know how to say this.
It's about being modest and humble, though, and keeping a
you
balance
don't
with
want
your
to take
ego.
advantage of it. You don't want your ego to take advantage of somebody in a position, because you have something over them because of a skill or weight or strength advantage or something like that.
So let me.
I know.
That just threw me off too. They were like,
so
I should get like a fake computer and just make like the typing sounds.
So my very last question. How important do you believe that it is to reflect, to sit with your partners and reflect and have conversation about your training and what you're doing and how you're feeling and so on and so forth?
It's important to do that on a weekly basis, not necessarily daily. But I think most often it does happen daily. Every time you're in a training session, it may not be from the time that you stop until the time the academy closes. Even if it's just 5 minutes sitting down with somebody, whether it be your last training partner or somebody else, just to talk. Could be about the role, could be about anything else. I think that's an important thing. It helps just maintains connections in the academy in that way, and helps foster stronger, trusting relationships between the people in the school. I'm really proud of that sort of like culture that I've tried to grow in the academy in that sense.
It works. It really does. The bonding experience that you have with people is, when we've talked about it a couple times within the last week of like, you're sacrificing your time, you're sacrificing your body. So by having common goals and understanding those goals, now you can maximize your output.
Well, you have to sort of find your clan, if you will, and usually that clan or that group of people is the same group of people that are around the same rank as you. So that group you kind of come up with, like that's each like graduating class, of students. So you tend to become closer with those people. It's not like you're going to become best friends with everybody in the academy. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of time, and a lot of cross time that you may not see somebody on the same day. But it's important to at least develop a few close relationships with people in the school, around your same level or not, or higher. But at least a few people in the school that can help you, people that you can turn to. You need that.
I like those healthy rivals. Like, I have a couple that
that
I
think
keep as my
I had
benchmark.
a few coming up too, always.
Yeah. Like,
they're crucial.
They drive you up.
Yeah, and I've had them almost at every belt level too.
Do you have one now?
Blue, at a black. None now.
That's basic, story, character.
Top of the food chain, baby.
Yeah.
You need your rivals to grow as in anything. So how should competitors approach training compared to non-competitors? And should they train, or should they just train similarly? Like, how would you break that down?
Depends when they're getting ready for a tournament. Their training, I guess, is not going to be any different. I think on a day-to-day basis, but I think once you go into like a time frame of trying to prepare for a tournament, then your training will be different. You're still, I think, attending drilling classes is still really important. I think just you approach your rolling sessions differently. Maybe the volume of it or the intensity is going to vary, or maybe the focus is going to vary. I think that would be the biggest change for a competitor versus non-competitor. I know personally, when I start preparing for competition, I don't necessarily roll harder, but I just don't allow the same spaces that I normally would in a roll to have good exchanges. Like, I'm not really as interested in exchanging anymore. I'm interested in dominating and implementing like my game and my jiu-jitsu. Like if I'm standing, you hit my hip and I'm like, oh, I fall. Okay, I'll play bottom now. Like, I'm going to fight 100% to stand back up and not give you those 2 points. I'll focus on not like allowing and giving away point positions. That's what I focus on when I start to prepare for a competition,
basically
more so
just-
than anything.
You're just practicing your
It's
intent.
not being lax. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
makes
lax in
sense.
position and not like, just letting my balance fall and just letting someone come to top. And I'm like, okay, well, I can just sweep them back. It's like, well, you may not get a chance to.
That's why I like because I guess similar to like when you go out and you execute, like there's a couple tournaments in a row that you were getting clock chokes. You're going in with, you manifested that because you had the intent, you're practicing it over and over, and you basically like in your head, you're like, yeah, I'm clock choking this motherfucker right here, That's awesome,
Yeah.
This motherfucker.
Yeah, so I think that's a good place to end it. And only because there was a theme there at the end, a lot of questions around competition, and I think that we can do a whole episode just on your competing experiences, maybe some advice for some competitors, right?
Absolutely.
Between training and not training, some really great points there. I'd like to next time maybe go over your achievements in competing. We didn't really ask too many questions about the competing, so I think that we can do like a whole thing on it. We could probably do a whole hour on just
if you're
competition
ready for
style.
part 3.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, you're signed up, man. You're like contracted for 10 episodes.
There's a lot in between too of just like color belt experiences, training as a blue and purple belt, people that I was able to learn from, and that time there. And I've been very, very fortunate to have a good history of mentors and teachers and friends in this community.
Yeah, we could probably go through like all the cool stuff you went through at each belt, even to now. Like, probably met a lot of good practitioners and
Down for sure.
Good.
Got to meet a lot of cool people.
Yeah,
Got to train with a lot of good people.
That's awesome.
that went by fast because we're at an hour minus the 10
Hour and a
minutes
half
that we
about.
were before we went on. Yeah, we're at an hour and a half.
Some people were getting a little impatient.
Me?
No. I meant like earlier. Guilty conscience. I just meant some of the people.
I was
that make-
born impatient, bro. I'm always impatient, but I'm not impatient about this.
I just meant the people earlier saying we're waiting. I'm waiting.
Yeah.
That's what I was,
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
referencing names, but
He was doing that on purpose. Yeah.
It was
All
a
right.
pleasure, guys.
thanks
Yeah,
for joining.
Thanks for joining us
Thank
tonight,
you.
man.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have Radji on.
Always good to see you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks everybody for listening in. For those of you, especially who listen live, remember to like and subscribe to our stuff. Follow Radji at Radji Barrett Jiu Jitsu on Instagram. If you want to know more about the academy and the schedule, go to the website at RadjiBarrettJiu-Jitsu.com. Elijah's sharing all that stuff on the screen with you now. A lot of great stuff. We have so many great training partners there. You're going to be warmly welcomed, and there's a really lot to learn.
Except by Eddie, he's gonna bully
He's
you.
definitely going to bully you.
You get smashed.
I was literally just about to say I'm going to choke you out, but it'll be a welcome.
Was Eddie just
Hug
nominated
choke.
as the enforcer?
Yeah,
He's the enforcer. Our next rash art is going to say, be a bully.
We have a few mad enforcers though. Which is
We
cool.
do.
Yeah.
We do.
With that,
Yeah.
With that, that's
Bully's
awesome.
closing out.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Deuces.